They sure had some good time rock and roll back in the 50s.
Yeah, but the 60s, now that was interesting.
Oh, yeah, but no way could we have lived through the 60s without these goodies. Now, what am I offered for this fine set of, you know this? Lovebeads, yes, indeed. Worn only once by, what, a flower child at the picnic, maybe. Or how about one of these? We couldn't get through the 60s without this. This was a Neru jacket, complete with Lovebeads. That was the uniform of the 60s. Now, there was one other little goodie, and they were mini. Oh, were they mini in the good old days? Maybe we should bring them back. But, you know, there was another thing in the 60s that I wanted to bring up, and we couldn't really get it here on the stage. Maybe you remember the go-go clubs with the go-go dancers in the cages up there? I guess the single most famous one was the Whiskey A-Go-Go. It was on the Sunset Strip in Hollywood.
Funny you should mention that, Dick, because our next guest was the first act ever to perform at the Whiskey A-Go-Go in the 60s. And while the whiskey is now just a part of history, here's the man himself to recreate the feeling, the mood, and the music from a great era, Johnny Rivers.
Everyone he meets, he stays a stranger. All with every move he makes, another chance he takes. All he wants left to see him follow. Secret agent man, secret agent man, they're giving you a number. I know they take away. Faces that you find, a pretty face can hide an evil mind. Oh, be careful what you say, or you will give yourself away. All you want left to see tomorrow. Secret agent man, secret agent man, they've given you a number. I know they'll take away your name. Secret agent man, secret agent man, they've given you a number, oh, they've taken away your name. Standing on the Riviera one day, laying in this Bombay alley next day, kissing persuasive lips. All you want left to see tomorrow. Secret agent man, secret agent man, they've given you a number, all they've taken away your name.
Coming up, Jan and Dean challenge Army and the American debut of the Human League as rock rolls on from beautiful Knott Berry Farm.
This is a Frisbee. Everywhere you went in the 60s, people were doing this.
That's right, Chuck, especially at the beach. A Frisbee, some suntan lotion, a radio playing some great 60s rock and roll, and Jan and Dean!
The little old lady from Pasadena, go, Granny, go, has a pretty little flower bed of white gardenias. Go, Granny, go, but parked in a rickety old garage is a brand new red super stock guy. And everybody's saying that there's nobody meaner than the little old lady from Pasadena. She's the terror of Colorado Boulevard. It's the little old lady from Pasadena. If you see her on the street, don't try to choose her. You might drive a door, but you'll never lose her. Well, she's gonna get a ticket now sooner or later, 'cause she can't keep her foot off the accelerator. And everybody's saying that there's nobody meaner than the little old lady from Pasadena. She's the terror of Colorado Boulevard. It's the little old lady from Pasadena. The guys gonna race her for miles around, but she'll give him a leg, then she'll shut him down. And everybody's saying that there's nobody meaner than the little old lady from Pasadena. She's the terror of Colorado Boulevard. It's the little old lady from Pasadena.
Thank you guys very much. Now, if the 50s were fun, then the 60s were turbulent. We lost President John F. Kennedy to an assassin's bullet in 1963. 5 years later, the same fate would befall his brother Bobby. We also lost civil rights leader Martin Luther King. Lyndon Johnson made a startling announcement in 1968.
I shall not seek, and I will not accept the nomination of my party for another term as your president.
Now that opened the door for Richard Milhous Nixon, who presided over a country torn by an unpopular war in Vietnam. Also in the 60s, there was a college professor turned hippie guru. Timothy Leary counseled his followers to tune in, turn on, and drop out. Not everybody was dropping out in the 60s. In 1969, we were taking off and reaching for the stars.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
And 6 years before we invaded the moon, the British invaded America, not with guns, but with music.
Led by groups like the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, the Kinks, Jerry and the Pacemakers, Herman's Hermits, Freddie and the Dreamers, and the Who.
Now, included in that 60s musical invasion of America's shores were two young gentlemen from England by the names of Chad and Jeremy.
Trees swaying in the summer breeze, showing off their silver leaves as we walked by. Soft kisses on a summer's day, laughing all our cares away, just you and I. Sweet sleeping warmth on a summer night, gazing at the distant light in the starry sky. They say that all good things must end someday. Autumn leaves must fall. But don't you know that it hurts me so to say goodbye to you? beats against my window pane. I'll think of summer days again and dream of you. They say that all good things must end someday. Autumn leaves must fall, but don't you know that it hurts me so to say goodbye to you? Wish you didn't have to go. No, 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 no. And when the rain beats against my window pane, I'll think of summer days again and dream of you, and dream of you.
From Knott's Berry Farm, rock rolls on with a tribute to the Beatles.
Piece of rock music in the mid-60s, but as the decade wore on, American rock and rollers took their share of the spotlight. The Supremes, led by the dynamic Diana Ross, had 12 #1 records in less than 4 years. Simon and Garfunkel turned their beautiful harmonies into gold classics throughout the 60s. Brian Wilson and the Beach Boys combined high harmony with the California surf sound, and to date have sold more than 100 million records. Remember the Monkees? They brought an American version of Beatlemania to television in the 60s.